Hello, this is Virtualis the Chess Noob, learning and having fun with chess. One of the reasons why chess is fun is that it is a battle of wits. And this isn't just in logic, pattern recognition, and computation, but also one of wills, misdirection, and bluffs. In this game, I made a decision to choose some aggressive, unexpected, and objectively bad moves to counter the opponent's line of attack. And it worked. I hope you enjoy. All right, let's start with the review. So this is chess.com's algorithm. I played okay in this game, 85% accuracy, and somewhat more accurate than my opponent. Though I would note that I am rated somewhat more than my opponent. Now in this game, I did reasonably well out of the opening, and here was some of the critical moves I made. That was the gamble, which then paid off. Now let's go to the analysis. There we go. All right, I played white, so e4, and opponent responded with d5, the Scandinavian defense. And my usual approach with the Scandinavian defense is simply to just take. And here, the most common response I've seen with my opponents is to capture back with queen, and I would usually then develop a knight to c3 with an immediate attack on the queen. So that was what I was expecting, so I didn't expect the opponent to play a gambit. And I think I actually thought some time on this next move just to see whether it was better to just accept the gambit or maybe try to defend the center. And eventually I opted just to accept the gambit. And yeah, so I took almost a minute to think that through. The opponent then captures back with the knight. And so effectively this gambit for black accelerates black's development. Though from my perspective, for a cost of a pawn, I don't really think that they have a great advantage. So I was happy with this. I develop bishop to c4. Opponent develops knight f6, knight f3, e6. I short castles. Basically, now that I no longer have my king's pawn, I wanted to move my king out of the center and away from potential danger. And if you look at the evaluation, things are looking pretty good. Now, whenever I play an opponent who's much lower rated than me, and this was just a random matchup, I actually get really anxious because I'm worried that, there's something about losing to an opponent that's rated about the same or rated quite a bit higher. There isn't much sting in the tail, and you don't lose very many elo points. But if you lose to an opponent who's quite a bit lower rated than you, makes you question your adequacy, I suppose. Now, opponent plays bishop c5, developing their bishop, and here I decide to develop my queen's pawn d3. And in fact, after I made this move, I actually did see that maybe I should have played my c pawn instead. And the logic here is that with a pawn placed 2 squares, so 1, 2, away from a knight, it's very, very good at limiting the mobility and the further moves of that knight. So that probably is a better move. And it also then allows for the push d4 with an attack on the bishop. And even though, there are some defenders there is now an extra defender with that pawn, and that makes that square contendable. But I play d3. Opponent short castles. I bring out bishop g5, pinning that knight to the queen. Opponent plays knight d4, and here, obviously there's an attack on my knight, potential sort of attack on the pawn on c2. So, the queen does need to potentially guard that pawn. Furthermore, I did see, there is an issue here. So, if the queen ends up in this position, I'm potentially having sort of 2 pieces staring at my weak f-pawn. I did see in this position that pretty much, the best move was probably just to capture, and that was probably okay. I did see, the queen would then potentially plop onto that square, lining up, but it was probably okay. There's still a couple of defenders there. Um, so However, I chose not to capture. I chose to develop my knight, and Stockfish still thought that this was a good move. I didn't feel like I needed to rush ahead. That if I captured, I was actually just helping the opponent's development. Opponent plays h6, and so at this point it makes sense for me to just whack that knight, which was the best move. Queen captures, so that was all expected. At this point, again, the logic was probably to just simply capture. Or maybe I could play c3, putting extra pressure on that knight. However, I decided to do something a bit spicy, which was to develop knight e4, now placing both the queen and the bishop, under threat. Now, I did see that the opponent would most logically capture my knight. And in this position, I sort of had a number of options. Best would probably be capture back with queen. However, then queen captures queen, and then I sort of damage sort of the defense of the king. So I thought that was probably all right, but at the same time, I didn't quite like that line. And I thought that there was a chance here that the opponent simply wouldn't play correctly. So they did the best move, the most logical move, which was knight captures knight with check. I think the opponent was probably expecting queen captures queen, and then queen captures knight, and then queen captures queen, and then pawn captures, back. So I think that was what was expected by the opponent. However, I didn't like that transformation. Well, I thought it was fine, as I said before, but I wanted to do something very sneaky. And I thought that the opponent probably would not expect king to h1. Now, the best move here, obviously, I think for black, is to capture that pawn with the queen. But I thought that the opponent might not see that move. And the reason I thought they might not see that move was, prior to moving the knight was, of course, blocking that. So that wasn't, I suspect that wasn't on the opponent's radar as a possible move. So that's what I did. King to h1, Stockfish hates the move, but this is kind of a gamble. This was the gamble. This was a bluff. What are they going to do? What are they going to do? I've got, they're seriously under threat. Will they find the correct move? My hunch was that they wouldn't, and they didn't. They did sort of a desperado move, thinking that knight was toast anyway, and maybe they thought that I'll be forced to capture, given that I wouldn't want to lose the rook as well. However, the opponent obviously missed that comes with check. I'm not losing any rooks. Here completely winning. So this was a blunder by the opponent. So logically they should have just captured. I think they were following my move, king to h1. That doesn't make any sense in this context. I'm more than happy to capture their knight. They capture back, now damaging the structure around the king. And more than that, I now have a number of very, very powerful moves with the queen. So queen h5. Opponent defends the pawn by moving the king to h7. However, the bishop's now dead, and at this point, the opponent resigns. So good game, GG. With risk comes opportunity, or at least certainly adds spice to the game. I was somewhat ahead after the opening, so opted to choose the less obvious line. If the opponent saw the correct response of queen captures pawn on b2, they would have been more than equalised their disadvantage and been slightly ahead. However, I wonder if their bias surrounding their knight resulted in the desparado move to capture another pawn, hanging their queen in the process. I hope you enjoyed this video, and thanks for watching.